Yeah, let's start first of all. Let's go with Joe Alt to the Tennessee Titans. When you watch Joe Alt, to me, he's like the fairway pick. Ozzie Newsome used to always say, in the first round, if you focus on doubles, hey, we're just going to hit doubles. Don't make mistakes. You can't afford to miss in the first round. If we hit it huge, hit the home run, that's great. But let's get solid doubles. Joe Alt to Tennessee, a team that is desperate for a left tackle. To me, that is the perfect fit. You also marry him up with a young quarterback. One of the things when you're looking at mock drafts and looking at fits for teams, when general managers stake their claim on a quarterback and the decision comes down to maybe a need on the defensive side of the ball or a need to help my quarterback who I've stamped my approval on to play better, they are always 10 times out of 10, they are going to take the guy on the offensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. So while you could make a case that, they could use this, they could use that, no bigger need than tackle. They have their pick of all of them. And I think to me, you take the safest one, that'd be Joe Alt.
Yeah, we do another series here on the podcast, called Teams That Will Shape the Draft. And one of the ones that we were going to do closer to the draft is teams that I'm having a tough time figuring out. The Titans were going to be on that episode, and maybe I still have them on that episode just because, look, the content's planned out. It is what it is. But at the same time, now at the closer and closer we get to the draft, DJ, I feel like this pick has been... It's got to be one of the highest approval ratings for any mock draft pick in the top 10. It's got to be one of the ones that you see mock draft the most in terms of Joe Alt to Tennessee. And I feel like post free agency, post them signing Calvin Ridley, it really crystallizes as this is the biggest need on the roster. And Joe Alt specifically is the guy that is able to fill that need. Tell me a little bit about Joe Alt as a player, because just what makes him, we've talked about a lot of other offensive linemen on this show, but I feel like we actually haven't hit on him as much just because it seems like this pick is kind of written in pen right now by everybody. But what makes Joe Alt a special player worth taking in the top 10 as an offensive tackle?
Well, when I pulled my notes on him, first of all, you just look at the dang size. I mean, he's almost 6'9", 321 pounds. He's long. So you start out with the fact he's enormous. He plays with a really wide base. He's always under control. He's rarely on the ground. So he's got really good balance, which is a very good trait there. He's not an elite bender. He's not, Laramie Tunsil to me is kind of the gold standard there of guys who can really bend and slide and move. He's not that. He's a little bit, he can be a little bit high at times with his size, but guys don't ever get into him. He's just so big and so long. He never gives up his chest, and he stays off the ground and he stays attached. So at the end of the day, I kind of look at people are you going to really move people? Or are you going to stay attached? And at the end of the day, I mean, it's nice to move people for sure, but at the end of the day, you stay attached, we're good. We are good. In the run game, he does a great job of that. And in pass protection, you're not going to get around him, and you're not going to get through him because he doesn't give up his chest. So he's not going to be as aesthetically pleasing as some other guys when you see him bend, slide, redirect, and all those things. But he's hit that profile. And obviously his dad played in the NFL forever. He's going to play forever. He's going to be a 10-year starter.
Let me play devil's advocate here for you and just kind of think about this exercise from a Tennessee Titans perspective. You're Rand Carthon, you're Brian Callahan. You've hired Bill Callahan, Brian's dad, who's a legendary offensive line coach. Do you think it's smarter if you have Bill Callahan in place who you trust to coach up the offensive line? You trust him to make this a great unit. Besides the fact that he's your own father, that's why you wanted to go out and get him, right? I mean, it's a dream come true, but also it's a dream come true in multiple senses. You get to work with your dad. You have your dad work for you, which that should be a fun dynamic. You have your dad work for you, but also you get a dream offensive line coach. You get a guy that, like I said, can elevate this unit. Do you think it makes more sense to just hey, let's have him cobble together a group of guys and he'll make the unit into a workable unit, or let's get him an absolute superstar here and just maybe potentially see him kick that to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can jump out of the plane and trust the best parachute of all time, or you can throw a backup on there. To me, that's Will Levis being successful is kind of going to hinge on their future there. So while I love Bill Callahan and I think he'll do a great job of elevating everybody's play, I'd rather remove some of the room for error and give him somebody who's already steady and ready to plug and play. And then we can use Bill Callahan to devote more of his time to trying to develop the rest of our group. But I just like the fact of having a pillar. And maybe that comes a little bit from my time when I was in the NFL, because I was on teams that had Jonathan Ogden. You never had to worry about helping him. I was on teams with Joe Thomas. You never had to worry about helping him. And I was on teams with Jason Peters. and it was a lot easier to build out the rest of the offensive line when you had the stalwart in place.
Yeah, I'm generally with you. Like I said, kind of a devil's advocate question, because to me, I always like the idea of if you have a elevator type of coach, like a guy that you think can make things better, make players better, put guys in positions to win. I'd always much rather take a B+ player and make him an A as opposed to a C+ player and make him a B-. And I think that's sort of what they're doing here with Joe Alt. Final question just on this pick overall. Okay, so let's say they get Joe Alt. They have DeAndre Hopkins. They have Calvin Ridley. Sounds like this group's not that high on Treylon Burks, which makes sense given what he's been in the league so far. But you have two receivers on the outside. Brian Callahan even said they're still kind of looking for a slot receiver. They have Chigoquanquo. They've got two running backs back there. They might have a functional offensive line. What do we think about Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans if they make this pick? Because I don't really have a strong opinion on Levis as a player, and I'm kind of like willing to believe anything at this point.
Yeah, I think he's someone, I mean, you say this about anybody, right? But I think you'll see a little different player when he's protected. If you go back to his time at Kentucky the year before he came out, when he had a little bit better wall in front of him, he can throw the crap out of it. I mean, he's got a huge arm, but he can get a little frenetic when everything gets a little busy. So I think being able to slow that down a little bit for him, I think you got a chance. Like that's my whole thing is, doesn't guarantee that Will Levis is going to be a good player or he's going to be a great player, but it gives him a chance. And, when you looked at where they were, I just didn't think with the group they had that, I mean, he did some good things last year, but he's not going to have a real chance to be anybody with what they had in front of him. So that to me felt like something they absolutely had to address. Yeah,
this gives him the best avenue to be the best version of himself. I'm not quite sure what that best version is, but this is the path to do it. Let me run this comparison by you, because I said I don't have a strong opinion about Will Levis, and I said that to one of my co-hosts on the podcast, Andy Behrens, and then I proceeded to say, I feel like actually there's a way, like he could be this generation.
I've got a name. I'm anxious to see if it's yours.
Okay, I said like maybe he could be this generation's Jameis Winston.
I was going to go Jay Cutler.
Well, I mean, hey, we're it's kind of the same
family,
the same family of quarterbacks there. And I can tell myself a story where maybe it's not winning football necessarily, but certainly from like a fantasy perspective and certainly from just like a fun perspective, a protected Will Levis back there dropping bombs to DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley kind of running these routes as the flanker receiver. I can see how this would be really fun football.
Yeah, I have a sports philosophy that extends beyond just football, and that is like the one thing you cannot be as a franchise is bad and boring. Okay, I mean, ideally you're good and entertaining, and then if you're good and boring, that's fine. I can be bad and entertaining. At least I leave the park going, okay, that was a fun night. But when you are like what the New England Patriots were last year, when you are that bad and you are that boring, like that is miserable. And it's not just miserable from the fans' perspective. It's deflating in the entire building. So if they're losing some games next year, 34-28, 34-30, and Levis, throws 3 to his guys and 2 to your guys, like at least we saw something here. It's like watching paint dry otherwise.
Yeah, DJ and I are very much cut from the same cloth when it comes to that opinion. I don't care how good you are, just be interesting, especially when I've got to talk about all 32 of these teams. Let's just be interesting.